Hello, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Maria Pio, and I am the Co-Director and Director of Education Programs and Administration at the Godwin-Ternbach Museum at Queens College, located in Flushing, New York. If you have not had a chance yet, I invite you after the program to visit our website at www.gtmuseum.org for a look at the current exhibitions, as well as a virtual look into past exhibitions we have done. And there you will also find information about upcoming programs and events. I want to take a moment to thank our donors and funders, including the Friends of the Godwin-Ternbach Museum, the Avery Arts Foundation, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the Museum Association of New York, Kufferberg Center for the Arts, and Queens College. Without their support, we would not be able to bring you this programming today. I would also like to give a special thank you to our speaker today, Gégé Lemay-Joseph, and the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience for collaborating with us on this program. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to introduce our speaker, Gégé Lemay-Joseph. Gégé is an architect and urbanist, set and production designer, and museologist. As a senior program manager at the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience, she oversees the coalition's activities in Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Gégé also leads much of the coalition's global thematic work, including the Migration Museums Network. She started her career in culture as a member of J.C. Cerrone's Creative Atelier, a renowned Brazilian theater design practice. She moved to South Africa in 2003, where she collaborated on several flagship museum planning and implementation projects, as well as exhibitions and other media experiences for heritage and culture, especially those re-signifying difficult pasts. She has developed several projects beyond museums' walls, such as heritage routes, television shows, and publications for both public and private sectors. So we are so delighted to have you here today, Gégé. Thank you for joining us, and I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Maria. It's my pleasure to be here. And I just wanted to say a hi to everybody, but I am in a place with a little bit of an unstable internet. So I'm just, while I present, so we don't have any intercurrences here, I'm going to switch off my camera and then I'll switch it back on once it's time for us to chat, okay? Sorry, the camera, not the mic. All right. So hello, everyone, and thank you for attending this talk today. My name is, as Maria said, is Gégé Lemay-Joseph, and I am the Senior Program Manager for Latin America, Africa, and the Caribbean at the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience. And I'm also the coordinator of the Sites of Conscience Migration Museums Network. Today, I will be showcasing some examples of how the Migration Museums Network members have been working to create more inclusive, innovative practices to serve our dynamic societies. For those of you joining us for the first time, Sites of Conscience is the only global network of historic sites, museum, and memory initiatives that connect past struggles to today's movements for human rights and social justice. Founded in 1999, we now have over 300 members in 65 countries, from Ellis Island in New York City to former centers of detainment in Argentina, to sites that remember and learn from the transatlantic slave trade in West Africa, as well as partnerships around the globe. The International Coalition of Sites of Conscience offers unprecedented access to a wide network of like-minded organizations from Bangladesh to Brazil. So since our founding, we have built grassroots networks across the globe that offer guidance and support to one another as partners, mentors, advocates, and allies in the Sites of Conscience movement. And we support these sites in a variety of ways, including grants, networking, joint programs, and training. I would also like to introduce the Migration Museums Network, which is a group of museums that envision an open multicultural society where human mobility is a universal right. They believe museums and societies must learn from the past and present migration to remove boundaries between communities, embrace history, and promote dialogue to combat racism, xenophobia, and discrimination. The network recognizes diverse experiences as part of an evolving culture, with a goal to create common future of respect, justice, active citizenry, and equity for all. So the network is also the outgrowth of an informal gathering of like-minded sites who, since October 2019, worked together on migration-related topics to develop actions and combat a global rise of xenophobia and protect migrants and their basic rights. As a formal network coordinated by the coalition since 2021, the group meets regularly to exchange experiences, collaborate on methodologies, programs, and campaigns to promote their mission. So our members are located in the Global North and the Global South, working from a variety of contexts and receiving from departure and receiving communities, grassroots and government perspectives. So that allows for vital dialogue about migration around the world and to inform innovative practices that foster social change. So today, I am going to speak about three examples of three of our members within the network in Australia, Brazil, and the UK, and then talk about some of Migration Museum Network's own initiatives briefly. Just to say that this is a very difficult choice to make because we have a limited time, but the members of the network have really outstanding work. And, you know, as these examples that I'm going to present today, there could be many others we could discuss. So the examples today will demonstrate how museums can generate impact on the ground by working with their communities, from the individual to the collective, from the street to the city scale. Migration Museums Network members are breaking boundaries of classic museum practice by collaborating with their communities on pressing contemporary issues that may or may not seem directly connected to immigration and often challenge museum status quo. By doing so, they can demonstrate that the dynamism of societies is very often due to their diversity. And this is a key concept for democracy and the understanding of migration itself as a vital phenomenon. It will also bring, I'll also bring very briefly two examples of the Migration Museums Network, how it works together and to create dialogues around migration globally between institutions and migrants themselves, as well as inspire the growing movement of migration museums worldwide. So the Imigração Museum Melbourne has as their vision people connected to our shared humanity and embracing diversity for a just future. They have in their mission the statements that say our trusted and authentic relationships enable collaborations where everyone belongs and feels respected. Our welcoming and living spaces invite all people to enter and become global citizens. Our intimate and captivating experiences connect people in their complexity. And our compelling and personal stories reveal unexpected ways to understand and empathize with each other. So with emphasis on the words collaboration, respect, welcoming and living, complexity, stories, empathy. And through their rich collection and exhibitions, events, educations, programs, and digital content, they explore themes of migration, identity, citizenship, citizenry, and community through multiple perspectives. So I'd like to talk about two projects that they have been developing. The context of these two projects is in the wake of the 2021 COVID lockdowns, people from Melbourne, it was noted that now they prefer spending their time and money closer to home. So leaving the Melbourne CBD a little bit dull and diminished economically, socially, and creatively. So the city of Melbourne, local businesses and arts community, social enterprise organizations have become initiatives to reinvigorate the city. The Migration Museum is part of a new arts and business precinct, which is working to bring the empty spaces to this part of the city back to life. The Migration Museum's vision and mission are perfectly aligned with this, and we will see how they've been involved in these initiatives. So the first project, I'm going to start by scale from the small to the bigger. So Market Street Gardeners was a project that sought to build hyperlocal relationships with neighbors. So adjacent to one another, the Immigration Museum and the Port Authority building, which are the two buildings we see in this picture, are two historically and culturally significant buildings in the city. They communities together consist of owners, residents, workers who share a boundary and a desire to see an innovative model of community engagement aimed at delivering on the Immigration Museum's mission to drive social cohesion. So together, in October of 2018, the Immigration Museum launched the exhibition project Grow, Gather, Share, showcasing the diversity and history of gardening and food culture in Victoria, the state where the museum is located. So the exhibition was consisted of 10 full wicking garden planter boxes in the street between the museum and the Port Authority buildings. So over the span of Grow, Gather, Share from October 2018 to April 2019, the planter boxes contributed to a more inviting immigration museum courtyard atmosphere of benefit to all visitors and to residents, and it attracted many more visitors. This exhibition ended in 2019, and the Immigration Museum, along with the Port Authority residents, began to explore the next iteration of what they could do with these planter boxes. So the residents and from the Port Authority building agreed to take over the care of the planting and maintenance of the boxes, which would be then maintaining that space as a space of mutual use. The courtyard has been increasingly popular for the residents and for passive recreation and community as a community space that was otherwise lacking in the building. The building has no outdoors areas. And the inclusion of gardening spaces in the courtyard provides a stronger connection with the neighbors and the city communities in the long term. So aligned with the city's focus on sustainability and the making of this courtyard more livable, it provided cooling and amenity where there was no space for other fixed green infrastructure. Community gardening was also seen as a very valuable recreational activity that contributed to public health and well-being. So this was a project that was really appreciated by that hyperlocal community. So the Market Street Gardeners Association was launched at the museum in August 2019 to take care of the boxes and garden, and it was the beginning of a new relationship between residents in the area and the museum. The Port Authority saw the project as a building as a greater sense of community and social connection amongst interested owners, and with the museum with opportunities to explore closer relationships with other neighbors through the relationship with the museum. So interestingly, this became a rare mission-led, cost-neutral opportunity with partners who have established need and complementary aims around social cohesion. They also coordinated to share skills. Supported by consultation with internal museums, Victoria teams, and external community garden experts, this project also aligns with the Immigration Museum's commitment to the global off, by, and for all movement, increasing the engagement and participation of diverse communities in the city. And it's an example of a highly localized project connecting individuals within a diverse group that can spark vitality to benefit a wider community. So this is very connected to their mission, is even though it's not directly dealing with stories of migration, is dealing with the diversity that comes from migration as the asset of a city. Expanding from the power of the neighborhood connections learned through the Market Street Gardeners initiative, the Immigration Museum embarked on a project to expand these connections to foster placemaking for all. The neighborhood circle draws from the CBD, from four neighborhoods connecting people from this corner of Melbourne to discuss their aspirations for living, working, and playing in the neighborhood as they are envisioning how they want to rejuvenate this area of town. So operating as a hyper-local network, again, the neighborhood circle is connecting residents, small businesses, operators, building owners, social and creative entrepreneurs, and the Immigration Museum as a hub. Post-COVID, the city of Melbourne wants to focus on its neighborhoods to plan the city's economic and social recovery. And the lockdown has given the council time to think of a new kind of city, environmentally sustainable, fair and equitable, creative and vibrant. So the area expanded now. So whereas before we were talking about the Immigration Museum and the Port Authority building. Now we're talking about an expanded area of these 4 blocks, and brings together several neighborhood players within these 4 blocks and their adjacencies to debate how to create a culturally vibrant and socially sustainable city precinct. So the precinct boasts significant heritage buildings, including the Immigration Museum itself and the Port Authority building, as well as the oldest men's barber and the building that housed the first pub in Melbourne. The Neighborhood Circle initiative brings together the Market Street Gardeners, the Collins Arch NW Hotel, which is located in this building now, which is a new development in the area that brought an average of 3,500 people to the CBD every day. Collins Arch covering an entire 6,000 square meter in the city block. The buildings in 2 towers comprise 49,000 square meters of commercial and office space, a hotel, and luxury apartments. The 8-story link between the 2 buildings, this part here, contains facilities, recreational facilities for residents. It's an iconic landmark, and it's towering over the buildings that are historical. So it also altered the precinct significantly, bringing an extra 3,500 people, and also the skyline. And so it's important that they were part of this to find cohesion again in this new scenario. So the Neighborhood Circle also brings the Market Street Park, which transformed the public realm into a central gathering, and the completed Collins Arch has brought more residents and businesses, as well as a new hotel. This is part of the ground floor of the Collins Arch building. The Collins Arch Amphitheater, which is a large sculptural undercover space within the Collins Arch, adjacent to the Market Street Park. And it's also an ideal space for programs that they are exploring in terms of the vitality of the city. It includes also what they call Flinders Lane, with Fry's Parking, which is a site which uses the roof to a kind of a quirky no-tel with 6 vintage caravans as a caravan park hotel, but it's also used for events. And Tonic House, which is a prestige events venue in a beautiful freestanding white Victorian era building, also in the neighborhood. And finally, it also includes the Social Enterprise Village. Once the Social Enterprise Village was led by Good Cycles, it will have 16 small-scale creative industries and sustainable future businesses to move into the area. And this will be an excellent opportunity to build connections and programs that improve the experience of how these spaces are used and what drives the neighborhood circle. So in conclusion, the neighborhood circle exemplifies the nuances. So before I get to conclusion, all these players came together and used the museum as a hub to discuss and influence the city on what kind of city they want, what kind of neighborhood they want for them. So it amplifies the nuances of neighborhood, by drawing on hyperlocal experience. And they want to also reintroduce the creative production into the precinct, which is something that Melbourne was very known for, and they want to continue and build on that heritage. It is fostering collaboration amongst businesses, public venues, and residents, utilizing public and private spaces to create opportunities for connection and engagement, and to build creativity from diversity, promote civic innovation with low financial resources by amplifying high-value human resources and spaces that exist. So as a hub for this initiative, the Immigration Museum is a key player by leveraging its connection to diverse communities, seen as a key asset by immigration museums to influence public policy and placemaking. In summary, these projects show how a museum could play a role from building from the hyperlocal neighborhood relationships they started off to building a neighborhood community that can work together to influence at city scale. These are achievements attained incrementally by working together one day at a time, from little to bigger. And as the Grow, Gather, Share project posed, from little things, big things grow. So moving to our next example, Museu da Imigração, São Paulo, where I come from. The São Paulo State Immigration Museum preserves the history of the people who arrived in Brazil via the Brás Immigrant Hostelry. As a result, over the years, they have built a relationship with various communities that represent the city and the state of São Paulo. The merging of these memories has created a unique opportunity to understand and reflect the migratory processes that built the city by valuing the convergence of multiple histories and origins. They propose that the public gets in touch with the memories of those who arrived from distant lands and with their traveling conditions, ways of adapting to the new jobs, to their contribution towards the construction of what we call today São Paulo identity. However, the history of human migration cannot be seen as exclusively related to the past. So Museu da Imigração has dedicated a great deal of effort over the last years to highlight also more recent displacements and promote debate about migration as a contemporary phenomenon that did not end with the closure of a hostelry, and which encompasses the arrival of millions of current migrants and their impact on the city. Migration is a heated debate in Brazil today, and undertaking this role is no small feat. In 2014, Museu da Imigração started to engage with militant collectives of migrants and women migrants to map, document, and understand their needs and demands as contemporary migrants. Since the beginning of the 21st century, issues of arrival and permanence of migrants and refugees and the public policies needed for their inclusion in society took center stage in debates around the country. So Brazil receives migrants from South America, Africa, Middle East, Caribbean, Europe, and Asia. And that illustrates the cultural diversity of the city. As civil society intensified its dialogues with public spheres, the advocacy of women migrant groups and collectives also gained importance in the discussion of their rights and the rights of all migrants. The 8th Migrant March in São Paulo in 2014 shed a new light on the topic. And it was structured around the theme. It was like enough violence against female migrants. This was the main theme of that march. And it was the first time that organized women movements of migrants and Brazilians demanded together better gender equity in the migration context. And then also in 2015, there was another march that denounced xenophobia, institutional, domestic, and obstetric violence, highlighted also the plight of women migrants' rights. So Museu da Imigração was used as a base for these two groups to hold discussions before and after these marches and organize their actions. And this was done all in the process of mapping these needs and mapping what was happening with contemporary migration issues in the city. At the same time, during that period, one important thing that was happening is that a new immigration law was being drafted in Brazil, which led Museu da Imigração to connect the research that they were doing to the need to equip society to understand and advocate for migrants' rights. So Museu da Imigração decided to use this journey of mapping and documenting and engaging with migrant groups to, in 2016, produce the exhibition Migrant Rights Nonetheless. This was a landmark opportunity to influence not only debates in society, but also policymakers that were coming to the museum and hearing the debates and participating and diving deeper into the research that they were doing. The exhibition stated that all people are subject at a certain point in life to wanting or having to migrate. The exhibition Migrants' Rights Nonetheless understood that migration as human right and that nationality or the absence of documents cannot serve as an impediment to the exercise of fundamental rights that guarantee a dignified existence in the country of destination. This picture is interesting because it says no human being is illegal. It proposed a reflection on the situation of people who migrate or request refugee status in Brazil, portraying their mobilization for the exercise and guarantee of rights and the conquest of spaces by migrants. This was a landmark project for Museu da Imigração in terms of open civil society engagement and co-creation, and demonstrated that supporting the development of public policies is also a way of doing memorialization and museum contemporary research. From that project, the work of mapping the experience of women migrants and refugees continued, specifically with a focus on women. Museu da Imigração, observing the growing work of the women migrants and refugees movement, decided in 2021 to dive deeper into the topic and launch an oral history project, Women in Movement, Female Migration and Mobilization in the State of São Paulo. The goal of the project is to reflect upon the current migratory context and to register contemporary migration. Specific objectives are understand the profile of migrant women today, reflect about the immigration process as a family or individual life project, understand the social relations established within society, register the achievements of women immigrants, their growing participation in migrant social movements and their mobilization strategies, verify their belonging and identity as women and migrants, and how these manifest and are felt. And also to get to know the projects that are being led by women. So this is an ongoing project helping the museum stay connected with its communities outside the museum and develop programs to serve them while influencing society's perceptions. It's also an opportunity for the museum to discuss intersectionality and to promote and advocate for the work of women migrant leaders, changes, and how they change the landscape of the debate in the country. It also generated an exhibition in 2019 called Women in Movement, connecting the project of around contemporary women movement to the museum's collections and its past stories of migration. It was possible to connect the plight of women migrants of yesterday and today, putting struggles in the context of a continuum rather than a contemporary only phenomenon. And that also places contemporary migration in a different perspective because it creates empathy between those who came before and those who came after. Another project that Museu da Imigração has, which is very interesting, and I think relates a little bit to the issue of artistic collections, it's the Artist Residence project that they have. So in 2019, they embarked in a new project to connect their collections to contemporary collections through discussions of migration. The project invited immigrant artists to produce narratives using the museum's collection items in artistic installations, and by doing so, to create their own narratives and interpretations of those objects. Museu da Imigração collections are formed by a mix of objects with clear documentation and origin and others that have less clear histories and meaning. Interpreted by artists, these objects could gain new meanings and relevance within the collections. One example was the project developed by artist Emilia Estrada called Cumulus. Emilia chose a series of very bulky objects from the collection, which she arranged in a room in an overloaded manner. And the central question she posed was, what memories can fit here? In a different, through this project, then Emilia invited migrants and refugees from underrepresented Latin American communities for conversations on various themes, such as childhood, intersectionality, racial and ethnic discrimination. And the project allowed the artist to become a connector between migrant communities and the museum through her artistic work and the museum collections, collections themselves. So be it by promoting debate about public policies and community engagement through art, Museu da Imigração keeps the finger on the pulse of contemporary issues of migration in Brazil and puts its assets and its stories about past migration at the service of envisioning a more just future for all. They're also currently participating in a project that the coalition is developing called Correcting the Record, to collectively create a methodology for museums and memory initiatives to correct historical records in their repositories and become more inclusive, equitable, and holistic. So this is being done by devising ways to deeply engage communities at all stages of museum making, especially in representation and interpretation of their own stories. And the focus of Museu da Imigração in this project is rebalancing narratives of communities discriminated on the basis of race and ethnicity within their repositories. Then a brief example from Migration Museum in London, in the UK. Migration Museum, sorry, just for a brief intro. The Migration Museum explores how the movement of people to and from Britain across the ages has shaped who they are as individuals, communities, and nations. Migration is a pressing contemporary issue, but there's an underlying story of comings and goings, stretching back many centuries. Britain has thousands of museums, but unlike countries from Australia to France, Brazil to the USA, they don't have a permanent migration museum. Now more than ever, they need a welcoming space to come together to share stories, understand our connections to each other, and to explore how migration has shaped their lives. And all to say that the Migration Museum started as a digital initiative, and this house that they have right now is not permanent. So hence the mention to the fact that they need a permanent museum of migration. So Migration Museum is based in the heart of Lewisham, London's Borough of Culture for 2022, and the UK's first Borough of Sanctuary. As a free museum in the heart of a shopping center, they welcome tens of thousands of visitors a year from across Lewisham, London, and beyond to their exhibitions and events along a far-reaching education program for primary, secondary, university, and adult learners. They also have a growing digital presence that encompasses exhibitions, high-profile campaigns, such as Football Moves People, which reached 5 million people during summer in 2021. So I wanted to talk about the latest exhibition they have just opened, and it's called Taking Care of Business, a new immersive exhibition that puts migrant entrepreneurs at the heart of Britain's story. Taking Care of Business is a new exhibition and shines a light on the central role that migrant entrepreneurs have played in shaping Britain's life. So many of the businesses that are most integral to UK's life, from Marks and Spencer's to Rimmel, corner shops to apps, are the product of migration. Entrepreneurship has always been at the heart of the immigrant experience. For many, starting a business is the only way to survive in a new land. Whilst others arrive with an idea and a plan, immigrants are almost twice as likely to found a business as people born in the UK, while almost half of the UK's fastest growing companies have an immigrant founder. Yet, we so rarely hear their stories. So with narratives about the impact of migration, so often depicting migrants as drained on wages, jobs, and resources, and not the creators of resources. So Taking Care of Business puts the vital story at the center stage, highlighting migrant entrepreneurs, past and present, across a wide range of sectors, from fashion to tech, finance to nightlife. It's also a very immersive experience, and it creates all different ways in which people can engage with the stories, including a migrants market that is the exhibition shop, and that also promotes and involves migrants and in the making and the management and as beneficiaries of the exhibition in many ways. And this has been a big success also in London. It's been quite a high visitation. And lastly, but not least, I wanted to briefly touch on two experiences that the Migration Museums Network has developed together over the last kind of year and a half. The Migration Museums Network celebrates international days such as International Refugee Day and International Migrants Day. And on the International Migrants Day in 2020, the Migration Museums Network coordinated a week-long series of virtual activities related to the intersections of food and migration. As seen across history, the lack of access to food or the desire for safety and economic opportunity can impact migration waves. Once they arrive in their new home countries, migrants often rely on food, not just for sustenance and financial income, but also to build connections to new friends and neighbors, as well as to stay connected to the countries and cultures they left behind. Cooking and sharing meals together can help build a sense of belonging, connectedness, and community among different groups. So this initiative brought the museums in our network together, as well as their communities, to share stories of food and migration, to build bonds, and to build trust, both essential to develop relevant migration museums. And on International Day of Migrants 2021, the network highlighted the work and the insight of individual network members who were interested in shifting power to their communities and allow them to share how they would like to be represented in their museums. So they asked migrants in their community, how would you like to be represented? their so all the collective contributions became a campaign on December 19, 2021. And an example is this video, which I really hope loads nicely.
JJ, I don't think we can hear it. If you do share screen again,
Okay.
before you do the share screen, it'll say there's a little tick box that asks you to, if you want to share audio, and that will allow you to share sound.
So I stop share and then, okay, go here, share screen, share sound. Okay, sorry about that. Here. Okay, let me go back to the beginning.
Perfect.
As a child, I was forced to leave my country, my beautiful country, because of war. And then struggle in the neighboring country for a better life, a place where I can work hard and be what I wanted to be. And that place turns to be Adelaide, South Australia, where everyone is welcome. The settlement square is really a presentation of different experiences from across the world. And it is very important to share those experiences with the South Australia. It shows the diversity that exists in the state. People from across walks of life came here to start a new life and make South Australia their own. We live in a world that is so diverse. Diversity in cultures, experiences, and different backgrounds. And I can see that world being represented here. Settlement Square reminds me of two things. One is life is a journey. Secondly, it reminds me that if you have a dream, no matter what it is, if you work hard and persevere, you will eventually realize your dream. And that's exactly what I did in South Australia. Adelaide has really given me so much. It continues to inspire me to do more for the community. And I'm honored to say I am one of those global citizens that are represented here in the Settlement Square.
No, sorry. Okay, so this was my last slide. I just wanted to make some final remarks and say that migrants have had an integral role in shaping the cultures, memory, and heritage of their places they migrate to, contributing social, cultural, and economic vitality to these arrival places. Migrants in arrival countries also have an integral role in heritage and memory of departure places. So museums specializing on migration are a fairly recent development in the world of museums. They stem from the growing debate around migration globally and from the acknowledgement that the stories and contributions of migrant communities needed to be better represented and understood as a story of resilience and contribution to societies they fit in. There are many stories and narratives that still need to be represented. Dominant narratives of migration focus on movement of people from the global south to the global north, but not within the global south. They focus on the cost of migrants to arrival places, but not on their social, cultural, and economic contributions. They focus on where people move to, but not where they move and not why they move and the impacts on places where people move from and the people they leave behind. And lastly, they focus on the impacts of migrants on countries rather than social, cultural, economic, political, technological, and environmental impacts that countries have on departure countries and on the reasons why migrants leave. So it's a story that's written predominantly by people in and reflecting the perspectives of a global north. And it is important to establish a movement that starts to deconstruct these narratives of migration and rebuild them from the perspective of migrants, especially in the global south, and the balance between those living in departure and arrival places. This would allow new concepts and ideas to emerge and for heritage to be seen as a collective phenomenon, for their heritage to be seen as a collective phenomenon made of complex connections. The Migration Museums Network aims to examine how memorialization can serve as a connector of these shared experiences of communities in arrival and departure places, of complex heritages and as a catalyst of a more equitable global narrative of migration. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, JJ. That was really wonderful. And, you know, it really gives us a lot to think about as museum practitioners. And, you know, I think this applies to even museums that are not necessarily migration museums, but thinking about, for example, the institution where I am in, it's an art museum, it's a university museum. But my co-director was actually here in this chat, in the program as well, Louise Weinberg. Between her and I, we have all these conversations, and we've had exhibitions, including the one that we have now, which really talks about the impact of migration and migrants in community. And we feel, especially right now in the United States, it's such an important message, but also so important to talk about, because people tend to forget, you know, sort of why, like you said, the reason why people have to migrate oftentimes, but also their role within this new country, and, you know, the country that I'm a migrant myself, that we find ourselves in. One of the things that you mentioned, and I do encourage anyone that does have questions, please put them in the chat. But I want to start off with, you know, one of the things that you mentioned some of these institutions do is really go out into the community and ask and sort of, you know, begin those questions. Do you know how that's done, or who from these, you know, the museums, how are these conversations started with the community? And if in sort of, I don't know if you have this info, but you can share sort of, you know, how does it begin? Because I think I can sense sometimes that perhaps people may not be as receptive to chat about or to talk about these issues. So I think it takes, you know, it may take some time, but I'm interested to know sort of, you know, how something like a conversation like this even begins.
Okay, it's a very important question. And, you know, there's no easy answer to it. I think, in my view, there are many different ways. I've seen it happening and starting within organizations in many different ways. But one thing you can be sure of is that if the organization is not aligned with that purpose, that matters to them, it becomes a token initiative. So you have to, and I've seen organizations that started with that at the core because leadership was in agreement that that was essential. Because when you work with communities, there's no easy way of doing it. And it can start with a research team, but there's like some museums, and I've worked with some initiatives that we implemented, for example, community engagement, specific driven teams. So people with the skills to go and engage community members, to talk to them. There's lots of things to consider when you start talking to community. You need to build trust. You need to build bonds. They need to understand that they will be respected, and whatever they give you will be used, and that they will be kept as a stakeholder in this conversation, that you're not just sucking and leaving and doing something else. So managing expectations. So you need to get people who have that training or have that sensitivity to engage with communities. And it's a very granular work because you have to do it on the human scale. You have to do it from the ground up. You have to do it on a one-by-one case basis. So there's no specific way to start. Usually it's set off by a new exhibition or a new project that starts. It can start with an oral history project. And if you have people in your staff that have the skills to do community engagement, that they can start that process. So that's why I say there's no one size fits all, but what you need to have is people who have the skills to do community engagement. And then wherever department they're sitting, they must be those connectors, and it must be taken very seriously. And you must be completely in alignment, transversal alignment, that matters. And that's how the way you want to work in your organization. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. I think it's a very brave choice, but in my view, is the only choice. You know, while museums still keep working from in a top-down manner, they're not gonna have community buy-in. They're not gonna have local community buy-in. And if anyone has ever read or had experienced any knowledge in terms of sustainability of museums themselves, local community relevance is it's the core. If you're not relevant, you can't justify your relevance to your main community, to your local community, you will not survive as a museum. So they are sustained visitors. They are the inspiration for you to fundraise. So, the quicker museums understand that they need to work at that granular level, and that needs to drive their work, it's a shifting of power. Mm-hmm. And to shift power within these organizations, it needs to be something that comes from leadership as well, or that leadership agrees and buys into.
Yes, absolutely. It's so important. Thank you for sharing that. Does anyone have any questions for JJ? Feel free to unmute yourself, or you can just put it in the chat as well. I do have, okay, Savannah asks a question. Are there any new exhibits that you or your organizations are currently planning? Is that through the Migration Museums Network? How does Migration Museums Network sort of publicize or create awareness of what exhibitions are happening, or what the work that these institutions are doing?
Okay, so one place to look into is the Migration Museum's Instagram account. We repost, so we have people that really pay attention to what the museums are doing and repost if they have new initiatives, but also they usually share with us if they're going to start something new. So we use Twitter and Instagram, but the Migration Museums Network has a specific Instagram account. I wanted to ask Giorgia Barzetti, my colleague here. She's from Museu del Mare in Genoa, Italy, to talk about their new exhibition, because they have an amazing project that actually is the fusion of the questions 1 and 2, right? Participation of communities and new exhibitions. So Giorgia, you can tell people a little bit about it, because it's an amazing project.
Thank you, JJ. Yes, it's not a brand new exhibition, but it's a brand new museum. So we opened the National Italian Emigration Museum. It sounds strange, but we decided to focus on our emigration in the past and in the present. And we have already a museum dedicated to the migration from and to Italy. So we decided to focus on the immigration, and the new museum will open next week. So we are very busy in this period.
Yeah.
And it was a very particular kind of experience for me working on this project, because we have to work with the community, but not the local community, because we are speaking about immigration. So we try to connect with the Italian people all over the world, with the Italian association, political or not political association. And it was very, very interesting. We find that a lot of people are very happy to enjoy and to participate, because they don't believe that in Italy someone matters about their lives now. And it was, for me, it was very strange, because the Italian immigration, it's an historical phenomenon. And in Italy, we say we are all over the world. Everywhere you go, there's an Italian. I don't know if it's true, but we say true. In this way. It's true, yes. And so before starting this project, I think the Italian people, or the descendants of the Italian people, feel the connection with Italy, and I realized that it's not true. They feel alone. They want to be more connected with Italy. And so we hope this museum will be an hub for all these Italian people all over the world. And even if we speak about immigration, we try to use a language and to give example that could make reflection about the migration in general, because some issues are the same even if you go outside from Italy or if you come in Italy. The problem about the languages, racism, intolerance, problem about find work, a job. So we hope people visiting our museum realize that there's no difference between emigration and immigration. The problem and the good things are the same.
Great. Thanks, Georgia, for
Thank you, Georgia,
for sharing that. If you want to put the website on our chat so that anyone that is interested can take a look at, that'd be great. And I also want to mention to all the participants today, so the museum, Godwin-Ternbach Museum, is also hosting and actually closing next week an exhibition titled Getting There. And it's by two artists and activists that have dedicated their life and work to creating a platform for sort of putting these themes and issues out, sort of presenting it to the viewers. And the current exhibition deals with a lot of those issues of migration, immigration, and those hidden voices that we don't generally get to see, and that's sort of amplified in their work. So I do invite you to check that out. It's on our website if you can't make it to our museum. And one of the things I guess we'll wrap it up with, if no one has any other questions, is that museums are in a time of, and I see this a lot, they're in a time of change, and hopefully for the better. I do see there's more I guess thoughtfulness in the way that museums as institutions are beginning to think about the exhibitions, how they present exhibitions, if they're collecting institutions, the objects that are on view, and how do we begin to tell those stories with the objects that we have, but also in a way that really, honors the past. So, it's evolving. I'm, really excited to continue to collaborate and to continue to learn, really. And I know that, my colleague feels the same way, and our institution certainly does as well. And, I think all of us as museum practitioners, or just people that are interested in museum work, can really benefit from this and can really drive change, which is really important. So I want to thank you, JJ, for being with us today, this evening. And of course, a thank you to all of you for joining us tonight as well, and today.
Thank you. I just wanted to also say that on our website, the coalition's website, which is www.sitesofconscience.org, under the tab Building a Global Movement, you will find the page of the Migration Museums Network. And there it's also a source of information about what's happening, but mostly also all the museums that participate in the network. The link to their websites is there. And Facebook as well, the coalition's Facebook page, we post a lot of content there. So if you follow us on social media, you will definitely get hold of the information.
Great, sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, and we're gonna end there. So enjoy the rest of your evening or day, depending on which time zone you're in. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, everybody.